Sweet. We're rocking. Great. Well, I appreciate you guys coming out. We've all been friends for a really long time, and I think, over the last few years, between everything you guys have experienced, everything that we've gone through kind of collectively as a community, I thought it would be really interesting to take a few minutes to just reflect on the idea of grief. I think right after I lost Charlie, Eric, you were there for me throughout the whole process, because I think, having a brother is a really unique thing. And, you communicated to me really early on, like, if you need to talk about losing that, I'm here. And, we've had a lot of really, really amazing times all together. We were all, together for your guys' wedding a couple years ago. And when we all found out that you guys were having night and, watching you guys become parents. And then in the past year, you guys have, hit some turbulence in terms of loss and in terms of obstacles with grief. And I wanted to talk because it comes at such an interesting time for you guys raising a baby. This immense joy comes into your life at the same time as, you experience this immense loss. And there's a lot of contrast in that. And I wanted to see if you guys could, reflect on your experience over the past 6 months, navigating kind of those two things at the same time.
Yeah, I mean, wow. I feel like you and I really haven't even had the time to like fully process it and like sit down and like talk through it all, because obviously, with football season, it's just madness, and he's just trying to like get through his work days, and that's the priority. But yeah, I feel like we've just been trying to keep our head above water for a while, and it's like, now that I'm thinking about it, it's like kind of hitting me hard. When you're welcoming this like new life into your life, everything, you're at this high, like you're, while also mourning a life that you once had. And then, you're going through that whole process, feeling really good, and, kind of going through those highs and lows. Me as like a mother, and going through all those changes. And then all of a sudden you get hit with losing Blue.
Lost our dog early on in the season.
Yeah.
Right when we moved him out to Orange County for the season.
Yeah, that I feel like it didn't feel real for the longest
very
time.
suddenly and young.
Yeah,
too.
and I mean, people also who have known us known that we lost Basil pretty similarly. So for me, it was the exact same experience. So I'm home alone, and then just dies like right in front of me, and Eric had just left the house, and it honestly, this is crazy to say, but it felt like a joke, to be honest. Like I was just like,
you're like, are you serious?
It felt like a joke. I like didn't actually really, like with Basil, I kind of processed it right there and then. I'm like, she's gone. And I was like screaming and crying. Like I haven't really had that moment of like release of being like, wow, like I'm feeling this like this immense loss all over again, because it just doesn't feel real, and it still doesn't feel real. We have moments where we're like, did we really just lose our dog all over again? So to go through that, and then a month later losing your dad.
For me, it was like when I lost my dog, I called my dad immediately. So it was like the first person I called, and it's one thing, I mean, losing a dog is, people who have lost a dog, they know how hard it hurts. But for me, it was like, I have Knight, who's my child, and it was like my dog was the protector of the home, when I was gone. So I feel like I was losing more than just my dog. I was losing like my wife feeling like she's safe when she's walking outside and, walking with our child. And it was like, that was the first of, of what we went through. And it was, we were moving to a new place. It was hard. But like, I can't stop doing, when I'm in football season, it's just kind of like nothing else matters besides the football, and it's hard to separate the two.
I feel like we're communicating it for the first time, because we really just haven't had the time to like talk about it. And so it's one of those weird things where you're just like, oh shit, like we really went through all these experiences. Like you're bringing it up, and I'm just like, it's kind of taking us back to like reflect and be like, did we really go through that? Because it just feels like an absolute
and you just stopped moving. I mean, like
this
time
is the first
span
time
wise,
we've
you
been
guys
sitting here and just
went through the season, moved back home with a baby. So there's a whole process there. You went away to take a few days with your friends, came back, and you're sitting here.
No, and,
So,
and yeah, it's kind of hard to process, and it's hard to. I mean, I feel guilty feeling anything but like happiness, because we obviously have this like new beautiful like son in our lives, and it's like, so then when I have moments of feeling sad or upset, like I almost feel guilty for feeling that, because we are so blessed in the life that we live and all that we have. But then I'm like, no, like we really went through some shit.
yeah.
We lost our dog again the same exact way. We lost his dad, who, you know, was someone that I had been talking. He was a part of my daily mornings, like my communication. Like he sent me a prayer every morning. It's just like there's so much loss that we've felt that I sit here and I'm like, it's okay for us to like have a bad day and to be like, okay, you know, like we don't have to just like be happy just because like there's so
Things
much
are
going
good.
for
You know,
us.
we're
Like,
all
things
sitting
are
here
great.
like things are, you know,
Things are good.
Things are
Sure.
good.
And I think it was just a sequence of events. Like, you know, we leave Minnesota, which was our home for 8 years. You know, we come to California. You know, the home state.
Back home, yeah.
We're home. Everything's gonna be great. Like
Drive
this is
from the
gonna
crib.
Yeah, like this is like damn. All my friends, I'm seeing all my people that I know. Then it's like, the season starts. We lose our dog. You know, I get hurt. Lose my dad immediately.
Yeah.
So it was like.
And it wasn't anything that you could prep for either. And
No.
I mean, you can never prep for death, but like it was all just thrown at us with no warning. And I think that was like the hardest part about it, is that there's obviously no guidebook to deal with loss, but like tragic, sudden, like right there in your face, like
The craziest thing I
rocks you.
found after sudden loss also is it changes your relationship with the phone.
Oh yeah.
You know, that's for me, like after Charlie died, for even still now, if my like mom or dad calls me 2 times in a row, I'm like,
What's up?
what's up? Like, what happened? And then they'll just be like, oh, I didn't know if it went through the first time, blah, blah, blah. But you're like, you in the 3 seconds between when you see your phone ring and pick up the phone can run through a million scenarios. Oh, this happened, this thing. And I think, you know, it's also for you guys, like, it changes your relationship. Like you say, you're grieving your past life before you were a parent too, which is something everyone knows is going to happen when you become a parent and you navigate that. But then it also changes your dynamic within this time that is in the way that life is written on paper supposed to just be pure joy, you know, and it switches that. And I think, like, you know, Eric, you talked about like you having to compartmentalize. So I think, like, you know, it takes a while to move through stuff like that, but have either of you, in terms of vocabulary and the things that you feel, learned any new ways that you think describe grief, especially dealing with it alongside something as amazing as?
I think community comes to mind first for me, because I feel like when I was going through it the hardest, and when you lost your brother, it was like I was there because I have a brother, but it was like when I was going through what I was going through, I realized that at first when I had to be in the facility and I was playing football, I was like, man, I gotta get home to my family, like I get to my community. But then, when I got home to my family and I kind of did everything that I needed to do with my family, I realized that I needed to be back with my team, because the community of my teammates, like a lot of people had went through loss with their fathers. A lot of people were really close with their fathers. So everybody was sharing stories with me that ended up helping me way more than I thought was gonna happen originally. It came from the locker room. So it was kind of like a weird combination. Usually you separate the two. When I'm on the field, you can't even think about that. But when I'm in the locker room with the guys, it was actually better for me than most situations. And I was so grateful that I had that community while I was grieving, because it was like so many people came out of the woodworks that I didn't even expect, that helped me when I needed it the most.
And you don't realize that, because you get those texts on birthdays and on holidays, and you're like, why are all these people who I talked to 5 years ago blowing me up about this? But then it changes when it's grief. And I think, like, I had a similar experience to you grieving Charlie. Indigo and I just getting back to work, and we're lucky we get to work on mental health stuff. We get to build this. We working on dual citizen immediately after, like, working on a mental health project all together. And, like, everyone tells you, like, oh, you just, like, take it easy, blah, 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 which obviously isn't an option for you in your career, which is what's so unique. Most people experience some kind of grief, and you don't have to, like you said, check it completely at the door. You know, you can carry that with you for a little while. And I think it's awesome to hear that community was that thing, and getting it kind of in the home and out of the home with teammates is amazing.
It can come from anywhere too.
Yeah.
Like your community, you don't really notice like, you know, the things you become a part of as you kind of navigate your life. That's going to come back to you when you need it the most. But you know, it was there for me. Yeah, I mean, I don't know. This is kind of the first time I've really spoke about it in this kind of setting because, you know, obviously I've been so busy.
Yeah.
I've been so busy and going through season, and I think that the one thing that I've learned is the fact that my dad, he kind of prepped me in a way that I can't really explain it. How everything, now that I'm like a little bit removed from what had happened, and the trauma kind of has settled a little bit for me, I feel like everything happens for a reason. And you know, that sounds so cliche, but I remember when I lost my dog and then I got hurt, I was just like, damn. And the person across from me in the locker, Alohi, he was like, hey man, you never know, like everything happens for a reason. And I'm like, what are you talking about? Like I hurt my hamstring, like I can't play. Like what the fuck are you talking about? Like this is some bullshit. And then the next morning, my dad, you know, I got the news from him, and I'm just like, damn. Like if I wouldn't have been hurt, it's crazy because I feel like with, you know, I feel like under normal circumstances, me playing football, I wouldn't have been able to, if I was healthy, I wouldn't have been able to like be there with my family as I needed to. So me actually being hurt, which I thought was a bad thing, was actually the best thing. Just how he explained it, because I was able to actually separate the two completely and be like, I'm hurt. I'm gonna go be with my family. I'm gonna get my treatment. I'm gonna come back and I'm gonna play football. And the order in which it happened, you know, you think that it's you know, it's a shitty situation. It's bad that my dad passed away, but
It gave you that week.
the order in which it happened, I'm like, that's the only way that it could have happened, because it was perfect from my situation, and you know, I don't know how to explain it.
Well,
But
I mean, that's so who you are. Also looking at things happening for a reason, and the positive side of these things. I mean, also the fact that he had a chance to meet Knight. You know, that's the other timeline thing with this. Everything is so compressed that it's a rare situation where you had a moment where Blue, Knight, and your dad all kind of were in the same space.
Yeah.
And I think there's this thing that happens in grief where you realize, like, every time your life changes, that person isn't necessarily there to see the change. You know, like you guys have memories with your dad, like in your house, with Knight, even for a short amount of time. And in the spirit of reflecting on that everything happens for a reason mindset, that is a reason. You know, like you said, he prepared you, he got to see you become a father, and then this happened. You know, it's a really powerful sequence in that way.
you just kind of realize how they impact people, you know, once they're gone, like they really have on you. Like the relationship with the phone, like for me, it's like I step into the car and I'm like, call my dad. Oh, no, you know, that's not available anymore.
That's like
But
the number one.
it's terrible. You know, it's like I can't call my dad anymore, but like, what does my dad do? My dad hits up everybody in the morning. He hits up Ally. He has this whole phone book of people who he just hits up. So now every time I step into my car and I'm like, let me call my dad, I'm like, no, let me put a feeler out. Like,
Yeah,
let me
do what he
call
would've
somebody.
done.
Let me call Max. Let me call, you know, my other friends. You know, let me call someone who I see as a mentor, as a father figure. So now I've kind of transitioned that kind of mindset to where, you know, when I do want to talk to my dad, I just kind of like branch it off how he would, you know.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like a blessing for me, because I'm reaching out to people who I normally wouldn't reach out to, and I'm having conversations that normally I wouldn't have. But, you know, it's also giving me that community that we talked about earlier.
It gives you a new relationship because you kind of get to step into the person's shoes almost. You know, I was sitting here this morning talking to Charlie's friends, Like when Charlie was around, I didn't have a relationship with his friends, you know, it's like whatever. And now you're like, the same thing will happen. You're like, let me call this person and check in on this person. It's you get like a new relationship with the person even after they're gone through that. It's
I
But-
think
oh,
I
go ahead.
think also a big thing that I learned about grief though is that like it's so lonely, and obviously like there was people that rallied around us and supported us, but kind of like with anything in life, like, you know, we brought in Night into this world and like everyone's like congratulating you and talking to you, but then, you know, the noise quiets and
Yep.
then like people go back to their lives. And I think I learned that a lot too with grief and us going through what we were going through. Everyone's there when it happens and, you know, they want to talk with you, but then it's like it speaks louder the people that keep checking in like
Oh, yeah.
afterwards. And so I think that like I've learned a lot about like, you know, watering like what is like, you know, the people that are really there for you versus like the ones that are just kind of there for the congratulations, like for the I'm sorry.
really
like,
there,
Who's
yeah.
really there? You learn that like big time going through loss, going through celebration. We went through both of them like so close together. And I'm like, yeah, you know, those people are really good at being there in those moments, but they're not there for the quieter moments afterwards. And I think that for me, I had got a lot of mental clarity going through everything we went through. Because obviously, you know, like as a woman having a baby, you're already going through so much.
Yeah.
And like I was already, you know, feeling very lonely and feeling very fragile and like going through this like phase of postpartum on top of then new things being thrown at me as far as like losing Blue and losing your dad. And then also, you know, being a support to you because that's at the end of the day, that's your dad. So it's like I'm grieving, but then I'm also trying to figure out how to be a supportive partner to him going through it. And it just made me realize like what's truly important in life, like what I really want to like grow and like put time and effort into, and the things that really didn't matter. I went off social media for like over a month, and it was the best thing I did for myself. And I even though it was like one of the saddest times of my life, it was also one of the happiest because I learned how to be really happy in my day to day with what was just happening inside of my household, what Night was doing that day, you know, our conversations. Like I just had nothing else to compare our life to. And even though from the outside looking in, it probably seemed like we were going through hell, like we also had some of our like happiest moments in that time too.
Everyone knows that about you guys too. Like it was like that collective conversation. If anyone's gonna be good, these two, like they've got it.
And that's the crazy part because we were obviously going through a lot, and you know it makes me emotional thinking about it. But at the same time, it was like my days where I was the most sad, I would come home and Night would be like poking out of the crib or something like that, and I'm just like, oh my gosh, like this whole life is right in front of us, and it's the meaning of life means so much more to me this year because I understand it from a father standpoint, which is like crazy because I lost my father, but now it's like connected through me to my son, and I'm like, this is a crazy.
It feels like really like
outer body experience that I'm like feeling right now, especially when it was really happening, and I was going through the whole wave of emotions. I was right where I was supposed to be, and as much as stuff was happening like that was negative that I couldn't really control, I really felt like I was right where I was supposed to be. I surrounded myself with the people I'm supposed to surround myself with. Like, you know, I'm working towards, you know, my dream. You know, I'm playing, you know, the sport that I love to play. You know, me and my wife have this beautiful kid, and it was just like, okay, like I could take a deep breath. You know what I mean? I can rely on my community, and we'll get through this.
I mean, you guys have such a strong community around you. And I think, you know, speaking to what you said about who's there and who really isn't, you were one of the people who was there for me, you know, 8 months after. That's what a family member told me. It's like the hardest part of this is going to be in 8 months when, you know, like people have moved on with their lives and you're still holding the thing. And I remember, you know, one day you came over to my apartment when I was living over here, and we just shot the shit for like an hour, but it was like, going out of your way to have that conversation was huge. And I think because of how much of that you guys put out there, both for your people, it all comes back. And I think, you know, Ally, because of how open you are about your experience with mental health and how you've navigated it, really changes the way people communicate with you, because I think
Yeah.
they look at you as somebody who is open and who is ready to be vulnerable and is always going there. What has it been like for you, you know, navigating it with all of the past context you have around mental health, and while Eric is focused on work for, you know, those first 4 or 5 months?
Yeah, I mean, I think that if I hadn't put in all the work that I've done, like with my mental health and everything, I think it would have been a completely different story of like my healing journey. And like literally when everything happened, the first thing I did was like call my therapist and like talk with her. And I just feel I was very proud of myself in that moment, because I'm like, my old self would have just like went downhill and just shut everybody out, not have conversations, and you know, not talk it out. Like we leaned on each other instead of like internalizing everything. And I think for me, I was just like, wow, there's been a lot of growth there. And I think a big part of that is just, you know, being open about like my mental health and like not feeling okay and like sharing that with my community. But I think it was a double-edged sword at the same time too, because I learned a lot about like not oversharing too, in a sense. And I felt like that's also why I deleted my social media, because there was like this anxiety around the fact that because I'm so open, that people feel like that I owe them
People love
information.
to ask you the most personal stuff because
Exactly.
you're willing to share.
I'm open, but it's like people kind of feel entitled to certain things in a sense sometimes, and like it gave me anxiety, because like when we were going through everything, I was like, oh my gosh, how am I going to share that we lost our dog again? What are people going to think about that? What is that going to bring? And it honestly kind of drove me into this like negative like mental space. Like I was doing well, and then I thought about that, and then I was just like, dang, like sometimes I feel like I'm doing stuff like for others so much and trying to like help other people talk about mental health and being open about it, that sometimes I forget about myself in the process.
Yeah.
So I had to reel everything back in and be like, and we had conversations about night during that process and being like, okay, how much of him do we want to share? Like all of that kind of stuff. And like, do we want to keep more things private? And I think it taught me a lot about privacy and like protecting certain things for your own mental
It's the
sanity
biggest
and
area
peace.
of your life, and you're putting boundaries up around it, which is healthy.
Exactly. But I do feel like I also have, on the positive side of things, like a community, like he talked about, even of people that I don't even know, that have kind of grown from talking about mental health and being open about it. And it's like drawn people in that, you know, have gone through either similar things or are wanting to talk about mental health and communicate that. So it was, when we did share everything that was happening, the amount of like love and support that I got through that was really cool too, because I feel like, you know, usually I'm the one trying to like do that for other people. So to have others try to do it for me, I don't know, it was like, it definitely helped a lot, even if it wasn't somebody that I knew. And it meant a lot, because it is lonely. And like you were just talking about, you know, 8 months after, who's going to be there? And sometimes it's people that
You didn't expect.
expect, and you find that support in places that you were least expecting and anticipating. So
Yeah, I think, you know, the work that you've done and all the things that you've taken the time to explore within yourself and create really make the foundation for it. And, you know, I always talk about like organizing the mental health summit with Kenny and like preparing yourself for grief through an understanding of your own mental health is so hard.
Yeah.
Like you can't prepare for it, like you said, nothing gets you ready for it, but you realize that everything happens for a reason. You look and say like, thank God I did that thing.
yeah.
And I think, you know, before we kind of like put a bow on it, one thing I wanted to bring it back here for is gratitude, because I think ultimately you guys, that's what we were just talking about, like at the very beginning of this conversation, like when people ask how are you doing and you say good, you aren't lying. You know, I mean, you are good even though you're navigating this thing. I think, you know, Eric, you really you shared it in terms of kind of being grateful for the timing and the community. Ally, throughout this process, what's an unexpected thing that you identified that you said, I'm really grateful out of nowhere that this is kind of a factor?
What do you mean? Like, I'm grateful for like.
What within this process with Knight, or kind of like how Eric said he was grateful that of all things he had this opportunity to go be with his family, like an unexpected moment of gratitude where you said, wow, that kind of emerged through this storm.
I mean, I found a lot of that in our son, and like
Our son was everything.
He
I
was
don't think you
he
understand,
was our
like,
saving grace, and like
like him giggling and stuff like that was just like bringing just life to us.
it's gonna make me cry talking
know.
about it
It's so
because
good.
like he really was like the biggest blessing in all of it, and I like. I mean, obviously I was home alone a lot because he was at work, and so I spent a lot of time with him. And I think one of the coolest moments in the whole time I was singing to him, like, "You are my sunshine," and I was obviously like going through it, and he just looked at me and he started crying, and it was such a cool moment because I've never felt so connected to somebody, and he just kind of looked at me like, "It's gonna be okay," and I was like, "I'm gonna be fine. Like, I have him, I have you." Like, that was probably like that moment will forever stick with me because I'm like, wow, like even though he doesn't fully understand what's going on, like that was something that like saved me in a moment where I was really not okay. And I think out of the whole experience, like that is what I'm most grateful for, is just him and like this newfound perspective, appreciation that I have for life. And he really did save me. He saved us. Like he kept the sunshine in our household for sure.
I mean, I cried yesterday because when I left the house to go, I mean, I left the front door to go get something in my car, and he started crying because I was leaving. And I came back and I'm like, "Why is he crying?" She's like, "Because you left." And I was like, "Oh my God."
It just hits you like,
I was like, "He's crying because I'm leaving." Oh
He's
my
like, "He
God.
never cries for me."
I was like, oh, it hit me so hard right then and there. I walked away from Ally like, she's like, "Are you crying?" I'm like, "I'm going to the room real quick." But yeah, like it's just that night's been so good. It's just been good for the soul.
It really has been. And it's been great for us too. I feel like we've bonded in a different way, and we've learned a lot about each other, like through this experience and all the loss and stuff. I mean, you get married and everyone says that's like the first year is usually like the toughest year, but I felt like, if anything, it's just made us extra strong. And if we can get through this, we can get through anything. And that's genuinely how I feel, because a lot has been thrown at us. You get married, we have a kid that was a surprise in a sense. Like Knight was a surprise, but it was also the biggest blessing. It wasn't a part of our timeline, but now looking back, I'm like, he was meant to.
Everything's meant to be.
It was crazy. That's what I'm saying. Like, it was
how it played out is how it's supposed to play out. Because without him, I just don't know how we would have gotten through this last year.
And then after everything had happened, when I was able to like rejoin the team and like kind of like get going again, it was like, it felt so much more pure. I feel like people were worried about me and a sense of how I'm going to keep going. And it was just like, no, like now I'm actually ready to keep going. You know what I mean? Now,
there's a freedom to it.
It was hard. I had my days where, I was tough in the facility, but there was a freedom to me being like, okay, now let me get back to what I got to do and, completely separate the two, which is, a gift that football kind of gives you.
Yeah.
It's kind of weird.
It's a place to completely put your energy the same way Knight is.
Yeah.
We talked about that yesterday. Like when you're experiencing grief, you kind of need somewhere to put it.
Yeah.
And I think putting it into all the love that you're, raising Knight with, and your work on your mental, like it all comes together and creates this like place where it's a very clear landing spot that you guys have for all of that energy.
Yeah.
Like it's labeled, this is where you put it. And that's the timing.
And I feel like I put this kind of pressure on myself as when I first got back, like the first week or two, I kind of was telling myself like, oh, I need to do this for my dad, or like I need to like go above and beyond and do something, extra because, I have to represent my dad and my family, where it was like, no.
Just be.
No. So it's like, once I settled down from that kind of mindset, and I was like, you know what, like I'm me, and I gotta get back to myself, even though, I do love my dad, I do miss my dad, but the things I do in my life and how I operate, they can't be in response to him passing away, you know, it has to be coming from my soul, my heart. And as soon as I kind of separated those two, it was better for me to, you know, when I'm spending my family time, when I'm having my own, you know, time thinking about my father versus when I'm, you know, trying to perform my job, I had to like completely separate the two in order to be, you know, firing on all cylinders, I guess.
That's an awesome place to leave it. You guys, that was awesome. Woo woo!
Thanks, guys. Oh man,
That was great.